As of 2024, the last hitter to hit 400 in an MLB season is Ted Williams. With his 406 average in 1941, 83 years later, it has not been duplicated. Despite the historic season, it did not result in an MVP. So let's look at Williams' 1941 season and the reason it didn't end with an MVP award.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
Ted Williams arrived at spring training in 1939 for his rookie year, 3 days late as a result of having to drive from his home state of California to Florida, along with respiratory problems that Williams dealt with for his entire career. And there was massive hype for Williams going into his rookie year. Williams spent 3 years in the minors, and in his third season in AA in 1938, he would hit .366 with a 1.182 OPS, hit 43 home runs, and drive in 142 runners to win the American Association's Triple Crown. And he would end up finishing second in MVP voting, a sign of things to come. Aside from just his performance, the main hype came from how much the Red Sox believed that he was next. In the offseason, the Red Sox traded Ben Chapman to Cleveland, who just hit .340, to make room for Williams. Reporters would call him the most hyped rookie since Joe DiMaggio, who debuted 3 years earlier. Williams would take Chapman's number 9, going from 5 to 9, and would make his debut on April 20th against DiMaggio and the Yankees, in what would be the only time Lou Gehrig and Williams shared the field, as he picked up his first major league hit in a 4-1 game. Despite his skinny frame at 6'4" and 175 pounds, Williams had no problem hitting balls over 400 feet, and he would display his power and live up to the hype in his historic rookie year. In the year of 1939, he would play 139 games, hitting .327 with a 1.045 OPS while hitting 31 home runs and leading the American League with 145 RBIs. The first rookie to ever do so. He also set a rookie record with 107 walks, with his 12 intentional walks leading the league. The first of many times he would walk over 100 times, as he also led the league in total bases. Good enough for a 4th place finish in MVP voting. And though there wasn't a Rookie of the Year award yet, Babe Ruth would declare Williams to be the Rookie of the Year, which was good enough for him. Williams would not go home for the winter after 1939, as his parents separated, and home was not a good place to be. And a comment on this matter would lead to the strained relationship Williams had with the media. With Williams being the face of the team now, and an emerging face of the league, the media magnified every mistake he made. And when he did something to tick off Harold Kais, he would write, "Well, what do you expect from a guy who won't even go to see his mother in the offseason?" These type of comments would turn Williams against the media. In Williams' biography, he would write, "Before this, I was willing to believe a writer was my friend until he proved otherwise. Now my guard's up all the time, always watching for critical stuff. If I saw something, I'd read it 20 times, and I'd burn without knowing how to fight it." Despite all the noise, he would prove himself even further in his follow-up to his rookie year. Something he had going for him into this year is Fenway Park adding a bullpen in right field, thus bringing the fences in 20 feet closer, an area that would be nicknamed Williamsburg, as it was clearly set up for his benefit. He also switched from right to left field after struggling in right as a result of the sun factor. Despite the shortened fences and now hitting in front of Jimmy Fox as a way to see more pitches, his power numbers went down as he hit 8 less home runs and drove in 32 less runners, with his slugging percentage dropping 15 points. But he still hit .344 with a .442 on-base percentage that led the league. Definitely not the first time he would do so. It was also in August of that year when problems with the media really escalated. He would create controversy in mid-August when he said his $10,000 salary, that was double the salary of his rookie year, was peanuts. He even added that he hated the city of Boston and the reporters. And of course, reporters would bash him for the rest of the year, saying that he should be traded, along with the previously mentioned comments. Williams would make his first All-Star game and finish 14th in MVP voting that year. But it was overall worse than his rookie year, mainly because of the off-field issues. And despite the calls for his trade and boos from the fans that led to Williams never tipping his cap again, Williams would be back in Boston the next year, and at the age of 22, would have one of the best seasons a player's ever had. Despite what 1941 would become, things did not start out ideal, as he broke a bone in his right ankle after sliding into second in spring training. As a result of this, he began the year making just pinch hit appearances, and on opening day on April 15th in front of a small Fenway crowd after a disappointing 1940 season, Williams would get a huge pinch hit single in the 9th, as the Red Sox would come back to win in the 9th, against the Washington Nationals, who would later become the Senators, who would later become the Minnesota Twins. And by the end of the month, Williams was back to playing full-time, and would go on a never-ending tear. After going 0 for 3 on May 2nd, he was hitting .308, but by the end of the month, he was hitting .429, after hitting .436 with 6 home runs and a 1.224 OPS during the month of May, with him hitting .536 from the 17th to June 1st. The month of May also gave a great demonstration of Williams' confidence that some took as being cocky. On the 7th, in a game against the White Sox in the old Comiskey Park, he told Charlie Wagner to hold the White Sox as things went to extras because he was going to hit a home run. And he was right, as he hit a go-ahead home run in the 11th. That is considered to be the longest home run ever hit at old Comiskey Park, with some estimating that it went 600 feet using the advanced technology of the day. And the 15th of the month saw Joe DiMaggio record a hit against the White Sox, and thus began the longest hit streak in MLB history for a player who was barely hitting 300 at the time. But DiMaggio would heat up in June, while Williams stayed hot. After going 2 for 4 against the White Sox on June 6th, his average was up to .436, and talks began to shift away from if he would hit 400 to if he could break one of his coaches, Hugh Duffy's record of .438 set in 1894. Those talks slowed down when his 23-game hit streak came to an end on June 8th, and his average dipped to .404 at the end of the month. But still, he hit .348 in June with a 1.150 OPS, just an insane pace he would have to be at to raise his numbers. And despite those insane numbers, Williams wasn't getting the main spotlight, as that was going towards Joe DiMaggio, whose hit streak was at 42 at the end of June, already breaking the modern record set by George Sisler in 1922 at 41. The press had made a deal out of DiMaggio's hit streak since it was at 13, and checking the papers to see if he got a hit was a daily routine for Americans, as he survived numerous close calls with late-inning hits, including a 9th-inning hit against the Red Sox at the end of May. And to start July, the Red Sox were heading to the Bronx to face the Yankees in a 3-game series. And this was huge for multiple reasons. The first being that DiMaggio could break Willie Keeler's record hit streak set in 1894, and the Red Sox were still in the pennant race, being 5 games behind the Yankees. So they needed these wins badly. And well, they didn't get them. They lost both games of the doubleheader on the first, with DiMaggio recording 2 hits in the first and 1 in the second to tie the record. Then the next day, after recording outs in the first 2 at-bats, DiMaggio would send one over the left field fence over the head of Ted Williams to officially give DiMaggio the all-time hitting streak and give the Yankees an 8-game lead over the Red Sox. That streak would go all the way up to 48, as both DiMaggio and Williams were set to play in the All-Star game, with DiMaggio hitting third and Williams hitting behind him. This was just the 9th All-Star game ever, and in this time, the All-Star game was taken just as serious as the World Series, with bragging rights being a huge deal. And in that game in Detroit, the NL led 5-3 going into the 9th, but the AL began to rally. Ken Keltner and Joe Gordon hit singles, then Cecil Travis walked to load the bases and bring up DiMaggio, who would hit a ground ball. They got the force at second, but threw wide at first to bring in a run and keep things alive for Ted Williams. And with runners on first and third, on the 4th pitch against Claude Passot, Williams would hit one over the right field fence to win the game, and celebrated around the bases like a little kid. He was carried off the field as a hero, as he said that home run was the biggest thrill of his career, and what may be the greatest All-Star Game moment. The Red Sox stayed in Detroit after the All-Star Game, and in the second game, after taking a huge lead, the Tigers would try to pick off Williams on a pitch-out, and sliding back into first hard, Williams twisted the same foot that he hurt in spring training. He would miss the next 6 games, and just like he had done at the beginning of the year, he came back and just pinch hit. And after he went 0 for 1 in both games of the doubleheader on the 19th, his average was at .393, and the possibility of hitting 400 seemed in serious jeopardy. Meanwhile, 2 days earlier, Joe DiMaggio's hit streak came to an end at 56. He was then leading the AL in home runs and RBIs, and after recording 4 hits on the 20th, he was hitting .375, and told reporters he was still eyeing the batting title as he stood 21 points behind Williams on that day. But something important to point out in regards to average is that during Joe's 56-game hit streak, he hit .408. During those same 56 games, Williams hit .412, and this caused his average to drop. And maybe Williams heard that DiMaggio was going for his batting title because after he came back full-time from his injury on the 22nd, he raised his average from .397 to .409 by the end of July. A crazy part of DiMaggio's streak is that after it ended, he went on another 16-game hit streak, meaning he hit safely in 72 of 73 games. But in August, he cooled off, as his average dropped from .378 to .356 on the 19th, which is the same day he sprained his ankle and was forced to miss 3 weeks. And one day after his injury, Williams would hit 2 home runs in a doubleheader in a 4-game series that saw him hit 5 home runs over the course of 2 days. And after a 2-hit game the next day, he was hitting .414. And with DiMaggio's injury, he now had a serious chance for the Triple Crown. And when DiMaggio returned on September 9th, Williams had the batting title locked up, as he was hitting .412. But the Triple Crown was probably too much of a challenge at that point, as DiMaggio still bested him in RBIs after missing 3 weeks, and Charlie Keller and Jeff Heath were in the mix. And considering DiMaggio was playing on the best team in the league that was 22 games ahead of the Red Sox at that point, who were in second, there were more chances for RBIs. And with the batting title locked up and the Triple Crown far-fetched, along with the pennant already being decided, the only thing Red Sox and basically every baseball fan was rooting for was Ted Williams to hit .400. and things looked really good to start September, as in his first 14 games, he hit .415 to increase his average by 1 point to .408. And what made what Williams did even more impressive was the lack of good pitches he was seeing. Just in those 14 games, he walked 22 times, and the 147 walks he would have at the end of the season was tied for the second most ever at the time. So Williams had to be very selective, and the chase got scary down the home stretch. In the 7 games following that 14-game stretch, Williams hit just .250, and that brought his average to exactly .400. Technically, it was .3995, but they rounded up just like a 5'11 man, and there were just 2 games left, and both were set to take place on September 28th. Williams was offered the opportunity to take both games off, but Teddy Ballgame didn't want that. He said, "That night before the game, Cronin offered to take me out of the lineup to preserve the .400. I told Cronin I didn't want that. If I couldn't hit .400 all the way, I didn't deserve it. It sure as hell meant something to me then." Williams was taking a huge gamble that would make him look bad if things didn't work out, and Philadelphia Athletics catcher Frankie Hayes assured Ted that they weren't going to go easy on him, as Connie Mack would run them out of the game. But to start out the first game at Shibe Park on a cold, miserable day, Williams would lower everyone's nerves by hitting a single. Then on his next at-bat, he would hit his 37th and final home run of the year, locking up the home run crown. And to raise confidence even higher, he would hit 2 more singles to finish off the game going 4 for 5, to raise his average to .404, with 1 more game to play. And all he had to do was not go 0 for 6, and all doubts were erased when he hit a single in his first at-bat. And in his second at-bat, he would smack a double off the loudspeaker horn, and this would be his last hit of the season. He would fly out in his next at-bat, and he was scheduled to bat in the top of the 9th, but since light hadn't been invented yet, the game was called off after the 8th. If he would have gotten a hit in that at-bat, he would have hit .407. If he didn't, he would have hit .405. But since there was no at-bat, he hit .406. And considering sac flies counted as at-bats in this time, that would have raised his average to at least .411. Philadelphia fans would run onto the field to celebrate with Williams, as he had to protect his hat from being stolen, as his teammates would help him into the clubhouse. And he celebrated by having a chocolate shake. In a year, he hit .406, hit 37 home runs, and drove in 120 runners to miss the Triple Crown by just 5 RBIs. He would also lead the league in on-base, slugging, OPS, walks, and WAR, with his .553 on-base percentage being the highest ever at that point, and what is regarded as one of the greatest offensive seasons of all time. And was this enough to win MVP? Well, I mean, if you looked at the title of this video, then you would already know that it's a no, as the award would go to Joe DiMaggio. And in a side-by-side comparison, we see that Williams beats DiMaggio in nearly every category, and by a pretty good margin. But again, you had to remember the mentality of the voters in this time. Granted, this was one of the most difficult votes in history, considering without context, many would be shocked to hear DiMaggio didn't win the year of his hit streak. And instead, hearing the last hitter to hit .400 in MLB season didn't win MVP is an absolute shock. And aside from just the stat comparison, you have to factor the previously mentioned relationship Williams had with the media. Voters weren't going to vouch very hard for Williams, and those few votes made a huge difference. And you have to factor in that the Yankees are the best team in the league by a wide margin, as they won their 5th title in 6 years. And in this time, DiMaggio was the greatest athletic hero in America. The 56-game streak was a great relief for people to follow amidst the constant news about all that crazy stuff happening in the world. So with that in mind, it's easy to see why voters went in this direction. And if you think this was just a one-off thing for Williams, well, think again. If you think not winning MVP after hitting over .400 is bad, well, Williams also got the unique experience of not winning MVP after winning the Triple Crown, as he followed up 1941 by doing what he couldn't do in 1942 by winning the Triple Crown, and he lost MVP to Joe Gordon, another Yankee who was behind Williams in everything by a wide margin. This vote is arguably worse, as there wasn't any hero tag attached to Joe Gordon, and the gap in these stats is even wider than it was in 1941. And all that crazy stuff happening in the world, as previously mentioned, led to what happened next for Williams, as he would miss the next 3 seasons serving in the Second World War, where he discovered his vision was 2010, a great explanation for his amount of walks. And what's even more admirable is he missed an additional 2 seasons to start the 50s, as he served again in the Korean War. But before that, he would get to relive his unique experience times 2, as 1 year after he would finally get his MVP in 1946, 1947 saw him win the Triple Crown and finish second in MVP voting to Joe DiMaggio. And this was seen as a case of voters giving another one for DiMaggio in his final years. DiMaggio won MVP by 1 vote, and the reason for that is a Boston writer left Williams off the ballot entirely, meaning he thought the Triple Crown winner wasn't one of the 10 best players in the league. And ultimately, we could have this conversation for almost every season Williams played in, considering he deserved more than just 2 MVP awards. You can look at Williams' career and realize he could have easily been seen as the greatest of all time if things were just a little different. He missed 727 games due to his military service, and if he had those additional games, with his 162 game averages, he would have been the second member of the 600 home run club, and the first at 600 home runs, and record 3,000 hits. And who knows if he would have been even better, considering how difficult it is not playing the majors for years, then return, something that makes 1946 even more impressive. Williams really had some misfortunes in one of the greatest careers of all time, with factors out of his control. Williams is a part of multiple all-time MVP snubs, and his military service makes his career one of the biggest what-ifs, in the sense that it could have somehow been even better, which is saying a lot. And he would later say if he knew hitting 400 was going to be such a big deal, then he would have done it again. And the voting and just missing out can be a good representation of how things went for the Red Sox and the Yankees in the 20th century after the trade of Babe Ruth. And you can watch my recent video about this iconic rivalry to see the 2 years where it hit its absolute peak.